Hello, thank you for joining me once again as I'm reading the Children of the Law of One and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. We are in chapter 13, and that's on page 182. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to listen as I read this because I know this is reaching exactly who it is supposed to. And we are going to read up until page 187, I believe, because we're going to have to break this one up because this too is another long chapter. So, chapter 13, we're starting at teachers and students. Okay, backing up a bit. While this chapter comes late in the book, the part of it that is my personal story really begins very early on, both before I went to the monastery and in my first days and weeks there. I was at the very least naive about many things. And you may also find a great deal of sarcasm and egoism in some of my earlier questions and comments to both teachers and elders, as I had not realized the wonderful virtue of humility. The ancient texts are clear and consistent. Find thyself a teacher. This is an old and time-proven growth method in many good spiritual traditions around the world. It is even still to be found in the Talmud with some different meanings and applications these days. So, what is a teacher? It can mean many things. Let me start by saying there is a big difference what we call a true teacher and other things, or people that seem to be teachers. What I mean is that there are lots of teachers, gurus or preachers, types that want followers. They want prestige, praise, worship, money, or a mix. Some you want to praise or worship someone or something else while they ride the coattails of being a representative of what you're supposed to be worshiping or praising. Some want it directly themselves. But a true teacher doesn't want any of those things. He will accept good life primarily and kindles you through his unselfish love. He will accept good students to teach them how to change. He will teach philosophies or techniques to help you change, and is a facilitator of change that a student can use like a tool. But he wants no blind or mindless followers, no worship, no praise. Anyone who does is not what we will refer to here as a true teacher. In our particular tradition, the children of the Law of One, a true teacher must be enlightened, having experienced the death of the selfish, separate self, and lives in total harmony, oneness with universal spirit, and is a servant of universal spirit, and vehicle for its universal will. Elders can also be teachers, but it isn't quite the same as the true teacher. The words used to describe such a being and the practices of other traditions obviously vary, but the end result should be the same, which we will detail in a moment. First, a word about worship. Worship is a very noble appearing way the selfish self uses to avoid personal responsibility, change, surrender, and its own separate self demise. People take all the best qualities and ideas and personalize them into someone to worship rather than becoming that themselves. They idolize rather than idealize. There is a big difference. There's more information about ideas and using ideas in another chapter. Idealizing just sets a standard of change for you to shoot for. The self prefers idolizing and worshiping because that way it avoids the hard work and self sacrifice required by surrendering to God and serving God. Speaking of which, many people don't like the idea of having a spiritual teacher or guru type person in their life. I know I didn't. Often this is for a good reason. There are many charlatans out there, but there are some saints too. And the real reason most people don't want a teacher is because their selfish, separate self knows it is the beginning of the end of its control and life. And as far as charlatans, what you get or get exposed to personally mainly depends on you and what your motives are. If you just want to mess around or seem spiritual or think you are spiritual, then you'll end up worshiping a charlatan. But if you really want help to become truly spiritual, kind, caring, harmless, giving, then you'll find the real thing and use their examples as an ideal. Many people are taking courses, going to seminars, classes, and channels that are conducted by charlatans, and they're perfectly fine with it. It's the real thing most people are afraid of. Es- Essentially, you get what's coming to you. You get what you deserve. Or, to put it more accurately, you get what you are really after inside, whether you know it or not. I wasn't looking for a teacher when I went to the monastery. I was just looking for a place where everyone was kind, sharing, and loving. That sounds good, doesn't it? But I hadn't really thought about the fact that I needed to be that way myself if I was going to be part of such a community. Nor did I really think about what I would need to do to become that way. In fact, I was so self centered and egoed out about myself, I figured I was already spiritual and virtually perfect. Wrong again. As I have said, all selfish selves would just love to be the only selfish person in a community full of unselfish people who just give to them all the time and don't give them a hard time about their selfish qualities. Keep dreaming. On about my third day at the monastery, during one of my first courses with the elder student Raja, he spoke of the issue, but I didn't get it at that time. Some people think they can get everything they need themselves from books, seminars, and life. That may be true. It may not be true. Or it just may be matter of speed or beating the odds. Everyone needs a true teacher at some point in their spiritual path to help them see beyond themselves and get beyond themselves. Because the selfish separate self is you until you're enlightened. So it knows every move before you make it, before you take it. And it will outwit you at every attempt to transcend it. If all you have is your separate self to rely on for your spiritual growth, everyone also has all kinds of excuses why they don't want a teacher or need one. And of course, they can use legitimate and reasonable excuses because there are many false teachers which provides the right rationalization to their selves feelings of avoidance. But the real reason most people don't like the idea of having a teacher has nothing to do with whether the alleged teacher is legitimate, is a legitimate enlightened being or a charlatan. In fact, most people prefer charlatans because they are no real threat to the selfish separate self. Whatever category you fall into, at least open your mind temporarily and read this chapter before you close your mind back up again. Putting your mind back on the shelf along with this book. Maybe it will help you understand what true teachers are all about and how they can be a tool to help you attain your own goals. How you can defeat your enemy when it is you. Raja went on. Once a person has realized that their personal enemy and the great enemy of humankind is the separate self and the selfishness that it spawns, what then? They can choose to walk the path of unselfish love. Then what? They can study books, meditate, use various techniques for growth or whatever, but there is a primary problem that supersedes any of these things. The selfish separate self does not want to relinquish control to the inner self, universal spirit. More than that, the very nature of achieving universal consciousness means that the selfish separate self will cease to exist as an independent entity. It will die, so to speak. So it will fight like a cornered animal for its survival. It will intellectually maneuver like a world-class chess champion to win the battle. It will use more clever trickery and deceit than the world's best con man. Before you can really get anywhere spiritually, you must first fully realize that the separate self has control over the brain, the desires, the emotions, etc. It has control over a person's entire life. So, if you do anything that so much as threatens your separate self, it will use the things it controls against you. It knows when you're attempting to dethrone it. And it is fanatically clever in its way to keep control and maintain the illusions of separateness. It will fight your attempts to take control of your life or to put control of your life in the hands of the universal spirit. It won't fight fair either. And it's already an easy task for it because it simply needs to trick you a little. So again, everyone needs a true teacher at some point in their path. A true teacher that won't let the separate self get away with anything. I understand all that, Raja, but why do you say we need a teacher? Why can't we just get everything we need to change from books and life and meditation? How can you say you understand all that? You obviously haven't even heard a word I have said. It has fallen on deaf ears. Listen to me with your inner voice, not your separate self brain. It first filters everything you perceive, including my words, and the filter is your ego, your selfish separate self. The separate selfish self is so clever, it can even use your own desire to change to keep you trapped. If it knows you are interested in growing spiritually, what do you think it will do? What would you do? What do you do? It can and will accommodate you. Sure, it will allow you to read books, etc. In fact, it will have you read books, go to the latest mediums, channels, and hop from one growth method to another, one fad to another. Let you get immersed in religion, whatever, as long as what you do to get involved with doesn't really threaten the selfish, separate self's control or existence. Even if you're working real hard at it and really doing everything you can to achieve enlightenment, you can perpetually be doing everything you seemingly can to enlighten yourself and be getting absolutely nowhere other than getting a head full of great spiritual rationalizations for the separate self to use in defending itself. You can spin your wheels forever, but in reality, you aren't doing everything you can unless you utilize the services of a true teacher, a clear mirror for which you can see the reflections of your own selfishness. Why do you need to see your selfishness? Doesn't it just go away as you learn more and achieve higher consciousness? There are a lot of people out there who are still totally selfish, even though they have a great deal of knowledge and experience in spiritual, metaphysical matters. These people know many meditation techniques and personal growth methods, and perhaps use them. They think because of all that, they are of higher consciousness. Naturally, the selfish, separate self lets them go for it. And it even pats them on the back for doing so well and being so spiritual. I guess it depends on how you define higher consciousness. But to me, the ancient teachings, such knowledge and experience doesn't mean you have higher consciousness any more than knowing how to build a house means that you actually have built a house or even have a house. He was right, of course, and the only reason I was avoiding seeing it was because of my separate self's fear and control over me, which I allowed with my free will, even though it was subconscious at the time. So, how do you know when you're kidding yourself? There are several ways. Here's a simple premise to think about. How can someone be of higher consciousness if they lack unselfish love and kindness? I have met many, many people with lots of spiritual, metaphysical knowledge who are still normal, selfish people. They may even be relatively kind and giving ordinarily, but unkind and selfish when kindness and giving requires any real self sacrifice or gets in the way of what they want. On the other hand, I have met truly kind and giving people who are metaphysically ignorant. They might think karma is some kind of new car wax if it weren't explained to them. Yet they are kind and giving, and they may really understand and believe in what karma actually means. You reap what you sow. In a very real sense, even though they don't even know the word, they may really know much more than some new age jive talker and be of real higher consciousness than someone giving spiritual seminars. So, who is really of higher consciousness? Let's say your house gets destroyed by a tornado. Who would you like as a neighbor? Someone who would help you rebuild it, give you shelter or food, or someone who will patronizingly inform you that you attracted this misfortune to yourself, then drive off and leave you in the dust of their Mercedes as they rush off to attend another seminar on prosperity, which is likely to be nothing more than learning black magic visualization techniques disguised as making money happen program. Who's more spiritually evolved here? True prosperity is something you can take with you when you die. And it only comes when you give through unselfish love. Back to Raja's lecture, which was stabbing me in the heart of my ego. If a person has attained universal consciousness, they, by the very nature of that, cannot be simultaneously selfish. And if a person is still selfish, they cannot be one with universal spirit or have universal consciousness. Many people's spirituality excludes this simple fact and may use sophisticated spiritual rationalizations to actually maintain their selfish separate self. Okay. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Raja, I said challengingly, other than your own opinion, are there any actual specific teachings of the Atlantean children of the Law of One that talk about this alleged great wall of self-trickery? Very many, young novice. They say that you must have an in-the-flesh teacher who is a clear mirror that will, number one, reflect your thoughts, feelings, and actions back to yourself accurately so you can see through self-delusion, and two, be a mirror that shows you yourself whether you want to see yourself or not, whether you are looking in it or not. In other words, one that makes you look at yourself, even when you avoid seeing yourself by self-trickery. So you're talking about a magic mirror? Gosh, you don't want to get this, do you? Such a clean mirror is a true teacher. The teachings make it absolutely clear that the final stage in a person's evolution back to oneness with the universal spirit is to find and use a true teacher to see themselves so they can really change. This is what a true teacher is here for. Such teachers are enlightened masters who have purged their own programming and selfishness and become clear mirrors. What is an unclear mirror? Nearly everyone else on earth other than a true teacher. Everyone you meet reflects you back to yourself and gives you a chance to see yourself. But the reflections come back distorted by whatever problems the mirror has. In the case of human mirrors, the distortion will come from the person's own programming, prejudice, beliefs, etc. All these things make for a warped mirror, like those in a funhouse, and will reflect back a distorted view of yourself. Even someone you may respect and who you have received good spiritual or philosophical teachings from can only offer you very limited help in your spiritual journey, if they are still unclear, distorted mirrors. If you don't want to delude yourself, deceive yourself, then you need an enlightened spiritual teacher. Otherwise, you yourself will always figure out ways, ultimately avoid having your separate illusion exposed and dissipated. If growth is what you really want, there is nothing that compares to having a true teacher. No meditations, no methods, no exercises, no words, no ideas, no mediums, channels, no psychics will do by themselves. Again, the teachings of the Atlantean children are very strong on this point. You must, at some point, have a teacher if you are to proceed beyond a certain point on your path. The teachings do say there are very rare exceptions, that there is less than a 1 in a billion chance to succeed otherwise, although that may change in the very near future as the coming changes present new opportunities and create forced internal spiritual changes for some. Maybe you'll be the first to really do it by yourself, young novice. Nope, no such luck. Learn instead of burn. Later, once I had finally given up trying to avoid it and found my true teacher, Zain, we had some great conversations. One time, I had a wonderful talk with him about the various ways of learning, growing, and working towards enlightenment which pertain to this chapter. Father, what is the best way to learn? And how can we know who to listen to and who not to? It is said that a wise man listens and learns from the wise and the fool. We can and should learn from anyone and everyone, and from life itself. Everything attempts to teach us, and we can learn if we are open. Also, we can learn things from the school of hard knocks, life experiences. Unfortunately, that is the way most people learn. And I only say unfortunately because it is the slowest and most painful way. We can learn more easily by osmosis, sort of absorbing by contact from the experiences of others. In this way, we can benefit from the lessons already learned by others who either went through the school of hard knocks or learned from osmosis also. This is the easiest, fastest, and most wise way to learn. For instance, if we see someone get burned by putting their hand in a fire, we can also learn from that, rather than also putting our hand in the fire to learn that it burns. Or, in another kind of example, if we spend time around a great chef, we are likely to pick up on their knowledge and skills, as opposed to spending years experimenting with cooking ourselves, burning things, making terrible tasting food, etc. The experiences of others can be ours if we are open to it. To learn by osmosis from the experience of an unselfishly loving, universally conscious, clear mirror is the absolute easiest and best way to learn and spiritually grow. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And that is part 1 of chapter 13 in The Children of the Law of Ones and the Lost Teachings of Atlantis by Jon Peniel. Okay, thank you once again for taking the time to listen to me read. Share it if you will. If you feel that it will benefit another, pick the book up for yourself, to read it yourself, to process it. However, just as long as the information is received, that is the goal. So until next time.